Hey guys, Cal Torak here, and today I'm bringing you my Ultimate Thorns feedback video for patch 0.2, Dawn of the Hunt. At the start of each patch, I plan on doing these Thorns videos where I just kind of introduce you to all the changes that came with the patch, and now that we know that there's going to be a 4-month cycle for all of the major patches, figured halfway through each season I should do a Thorns feedback video just to give GGG some feedback to work with in case they are monitoring the community and what they think about Thorns and the direction it's going in. So expect one of these videos halfway through every single season going forward. So what is the point of this video? GGG is about to have all their eyes back on PoE 2 to prepare for the upcoming patches and patch 0.3. The goal of this video is to solve the major pain points of Thorns. Thorns is unfriendly to League Start and solo self-found playstyles for many reasons. The goal isn't to solve all of the problems with Thorns, but to address the problems that make it difficult to approach. As of right now, I will not be League starting Thorns in patch 0.3. I will be League starting as one of my Wind Dancer builds unless Thorns gets some very drastic changes. Thorns is not viable in a League start environment at all due to how unique heavy it is, and our main damage source is gated behind tier 3 support gems. Thorns also struggles greatly with endgame scaling because you can't put support gems into Thorns. Okay, so let's just dive into my general feedback. And the first problem I have is with Crown of the Pale King and its effect. For those that don't know, Crown of the Pale King is the core helmet for Thorns. You cannot play Thorns functionally without this helmet. Thorns, it reflects your Thorns damage at the enemy when they hit you with a melee strike. Now, only a fraction of the attacks and just hits in this game are melee strikes, but the helmet enables all hits to trigger Thorns. You cannot play Thorns without this helmet, outside of like very niche scenarios where you're using deepest tower and pinnacle content versus pinnacle content that does melee strikes consistently. Outside of that, you are not running that. And you really need this helmet. Like if you've tried playing Thorns without Crown of the Pale King, you don't play Thorns. Like, it is that bad. And yeah, getting it as a unique can be very difficult. In League Start, like, you obviously have to go through either the trade process of, like, getting it day one, which, some people don't want to have to deal with that problem. And yeah, just in solo self-found, you can't force this helmet reliably easily. So the helmet having this mechanic behind it is a huge pain point for Thorns. This mechanic is important. I don't think Thorns should just reflect on all hits by default. I think this mechanic should be something that enables the build. It just needs to be moved from the helmet. And my solution is it needs to be moved to a spirit gem. Right now, it being gated behind a legendary or unique, it just limits the playstyle too much to just like having that farm unique. I know that some build archetypes do get enabled by uniques, but I don't think Thorns should be one of them. Not to this extent. You should be able to start leveling with it, and if you introduce Crown of the Pale King's effect as a spirit gem, then you don't have to worry about this problem. Anyone can feel comfortable League starting Thorns. Maybe merge it with Scavenge Plating, maybe make it a separate Spirit Gem. I'm not sure there. If it is going to be a Tier 1 Spirit Gem on its own, maybe bump Scavenge Plating up to a Tier 2 Spirit Gem and buff its damage a little bit so we have more Thorns damage in late game. But either way, I think Crown of the Pale King should be moved from its helmet's effects, from the helmet to a Spirit Gem, and then I don't think it should be moved to the passive tree. A lot of the feedback I've seen from my commenters and viewers say maybe put it as a keystone, but the problem I have with the keystone is half of the passive tree won't have access to that keystone easily. So this only enables the bottom left-hand side of the tree to play Thorns, and I don't think that should be the case. I think it should be a Spirit Gem, personally. Now, what do we do with Crown of the Pale King? We can't just take its effect and then leave the helmet with nothing, right? Well, one of the biggest problems with Thorns in general is you cannot put support gems into Thorns. If you ever played any Path of Exile game, you will understand that support gems are a massive amount of your damage, and there's no way to modify or change your Thorns via support gems. So what is a way to do that? Well, right now, it sounds like the game, it calls Thorns when you reflect your damage at the enemy. They call it Retaliate right now in the codes files. So maybe with Crown of the Pale King, you get the Retaliate skill. This is a skill gem that that will appear on your skill setup. It does not do anything, but it just lets you put support gems into Thorns. That way you can modify it. And if you enabled it to where it's scaled with level, like weapons do, you know how if you have a mace strike, right? At low levels, you only have room for 2 support gem sockets, right? But at level 90, you have access to get the whole 5 sockets into it, right? If you keep it a low level helmet, you could have it scale over time, right? And that would enable it to still be a core part of Thorns, but not required to start Thorns. You can also just make it an endgame helmet that has the 5 support gem sockets. But that was my idea, to keep Crown of the Pale King relevant while also enabling Thorns with support gems. I think this is just a big talking point in general. Support gems need to be able to enable Thorns somehow. I don't know the best way to do that. But to me, giving us the gem Retaliate would be nice, or the skill Retaliate somehow would be nice. That lets you put support gems into Thorns directly. How we do that, I feel like Crown of the Pale King would be the first starting point. Right now, we're required to play Thorns with the all hits reflect stuff. But support gems are not required for Thorns. They're just required to push pinnacle content easier. So whatever happens with Retaliate, it doesn't necessarily need to be tied to Crown of the Pale King, but that was my initial thought, is to keep Crown of the Pale King relevant, you give it the skill Retaliate, and that lets us put support gems into Thorns, while also keeping the helmet relevant. Moving on, the next biggest barrier to entry for Thorns is, if let's just say, we get this Spirit Gem changed to Crown of the Pale King, to where now we can League start Thorns. You still probably might not, just because Barbs and Quill Burst are a massive portion of Thorns damage right now. Yes, being able to reflect all hits is nice, and it works on some bosses and some rares, but there are many mob types in this game that do not reflect Thorns damage, or they attack in ways that are so sporadic that you can't reliably get hits in on them. That's where Barbs and Quillbursts come in. If you've played any Thorns build, these are key to playing Thorns. They are tier 3 support gems. So you are not League starting with Thorns without Barbs and Quillbursts very easily. Even with Retaliate. Right now, I think all of the Thorn support gems are tier 3 support gems. Barbs and Quillburst are pretty key to enabling Thorns. I think Barbs needs to be made a tier 1 support gem. Obviously, I would like to see both of them made tier 1 support gems, but if you kept Quillburst as tier 2 or tier 3, I think that's more acceptable, but one of them, and probably Barbs, has to be accessible from early game, or they're just, again, you can find moments where Thorns is fine without Barbs and Quillbursts, but throughout a majority of the campaign, you're going to be running into moments where you need both Crown of the Pale King's effect, and you need at least Barbs to be able to manage the content reasonably well. And without both of those being enabled from the start, again, I don't think I'll be League starting. I'll be League starting Thorns in patch 0.3. It's just too shaky of a start, and then always be an alternate character for me. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is Thorns passives not providing massive defensive gains. Thorns is a style where you have to take damage to deal damage, so you need to be beefy to deal with it. And I feel like every single Thorns passive on the tree should have some form of defensive bonus to it. Some of them right now give you Thorns damage and block chance. That's great. Some of them right now give you Thorns damage and leech. That's great. I feel like every single Thorns passive on the tree should be giving a defensive aspect. You can maybe not give the crit ones a defensive aspect, but right now, Thorns is just... The biggest problem is it needs to survive the hits. And if you're going to be leaning into Thorns as a playstyle, it would really help if there was just more ways to mitigate damage in other ways. The leech talents were a great start. The changes to Vengeance in patch 0.2 were perfect. I feel like that is the direction we need to be going with all of these Thorns talents, is they're more defensive enabling, because no matter what, if you are playing Thorns, you are taking damage to deal damage. So we have to have like just some form of just beefier layers to it. Right now, it's just the Thorns Leech is the best thing we've got, but I think we need just a little bit more love in the defensive the defensive department from the passive trees. Whether that's physical damage reduction, recoup, more block chance, but it's right now it's very minor defensive gains when we gain them, and it needs to be more critical to the play style. That just needs to really just drive home that like you're taking damage to deal damage, and yeah, I feel like that's a big important shift for these styles. Continuing on with passives, let's talk about spiked armor. It is, in my opinion, useless. You are armor breaking for Thorns to utilize Scavenge Plating. So your Thorns damage ignoring the armor is not a big deal. In most of my Thorns builds, I feel like putting passives into those is a waste of passive points. Not to mention the fact that a lot of people play Warbringer for Thorns, and you're just breaking armor by default. So Thorns damage ignoring armor, it is just really out of place in the current Thorns meta. What I think would be a great change, though, is Thorns damage breaks armor. That way, you are enabling us to build stacks of Scavenge Plating easier without being a Warbringer all the time. This lets other Ascendancies be able to, get the easier access to Scavenge Plating. Because right now, you're forced to just force Armor Break into your build if you're not a Warbringer through many different ways. Whether that's through Resonating Shield, or through Armor Breaker, or through support gem like Splinter, right? Or through the Corrosion via Poison Spread, right? There's a lot of ways we can incorporate Armor Break in, but I think for Thorn specifically, if you made that talent, that passive, specifically it breaks armor, that is huge for Thorns. But as it stands right now, spiked armor is pretty useless. You're not taking it ever. Next up, I want to talk about Thorns itemization. Thorns damage can only roll on belt, shield, and body armor. This makes situations where you want a unique piece of these slots, example, Couture of Crimson for Overleech or Sacrosanctum for Recoup. To wear these items, you are sacrificing a massive amount of your Thorns damage. We need to be able to access Thorns damage easier from most items. Because right now, it is just really limited. I mean, and across the board, Thorns is just super unique heavy. Of all the builds I play, I feel like if I wanted to, I could wear a unique piece in every single slot. It's just, you lose so much Thorns damage in that process. So I feel like we just need more Thorns damage on gear. It can't just be those three pieces. I feel like at least one more slot needs a Thorns damage roll. Gloves, potentially. I'm not sure. I don't see why it can't be on gloves, chest, helmet, like the works. Maybe that will be a thing that we tackle later down the road. But right now, it being limited to belt, shield, and body armor, we're already unique heavy in all of the other slots, right? And then in a lot of times you want to use Chernobog with Thorns, right? So that's replacing your shield. And then there's just so many good body armors like Moriors and, the ones that I listed, Sacrosanctum and Couture. Like, they're so good. And then, with Kyle the Pale King, and then we have the Thorns rings, and then we have the Thorns boots, 2 pairs of Thorns boots, which we'll talk about here in a second. We have the crit gloves. We have like the instant crit gloves. Like Thorns is so unique heavy right now that if Thorns had damage options on all slots, it wouldn't break the spec or the play style. It would just allow us more flexibility in unique choice, I think. Maybe I'm wrong here, but I do think that itemization is lacking when it's limited to those 3 slots. And one thing that might help a lot with that is runes. Right now, we only have the runes of Tithing that do the Lightning Thorns damage. I would love to see Thorns of every flavor at some point. But for me personally, the ones that I'm most interested in right now are Fire Thorns and Physical Thorns. So Thorns, we need more Thorns runes. Lightning was a great start, but I would love to see maybe a Physical Thorns rune that comes with option, like a defensives with it. Maybe like it's Thorns damage with block chance rune or something. Like I don't even think there's a block chance rune right now, right? So like Thorns damage with block chance, that goes great with Thorns playstyles right now. And then of course, I'm a big fan of Fire Thorns. I did the Beerus Thorns. I wanted to do a Night Thorns, but right now it just doesn't work. Having more ways to scale Fire Thorns damage would be awesome. So those 2 are huge for me. Last about itemization, I talked about the unique boots. Right now, Beetle Bite, despite dropping from Pinnacle content, I believe it drops from King of the Mist, they are way worse than Briar Patch. They need some serious love to compete with any crit Thorns builds. Right now, again, I already talked about how every single slot I feel like we need a unique in right now for Thorns builds. And right now, crit is just so good for Thorns, especially since you have the Thorns passives. And then Briar Patch is flat Thorns crit. It's just like, it's not percentage increase, right? You're just getting the flat Thorns crit. That is insane. And Beetle Bite just doesn't even come close to competing with it. Like, Thorns builds are the only way to, or crit builds are the only way to play Thorns right now. So Beetle Bite needs some love, for sure. And of course, it's not on my list here, but it's coming over time. But, the more Thorns uniques, the better, in my opinion. Crackling Barrier. It needs some love. This is when you are channeling a skill, you get 15% of your maximum mana as Lightning Thorns. This is pretty weak. This could be 100% of your mana as Thorns, and it still would not compete with the normal physical damage Thorns. Mana stacking is pretty limited right now, and the channel skills we have to work with, they're not great. You have something like Perfect Strike, you have Resonating Shield, you have Incinerate. None of them really feel great with this playstyle right now. This is more we're limited by skills issue, so I'm not going to complain too much about this. Cyclone will be a huge skill bonus for this one day. But right now, because we can't put Barbs and Resonating Shield, this makes this playstyle pretty unviable right now. I feel like even with future skills in mind, Crackling Barrier needs a damage increase. 15% of maximum mana. Unless the mana, unless you guys are predicting the mana values to double or triple sometime soon, 15% is not enough. Not even close. Like, when you talk about max rank Scavenge Plating, it's not even close. And last, I want to talk about Force Thorns proc. So there is just certain content right now that either it's inevitable. Like, I could make a list of every single mob, and maybe at one point I will have to do a huge list of these are the most dangerous enemies to Thorns because they will not proc Thorns, right? And you just can't deal with them, right? I don't think that's the solution here, though. I think we just need a way to force proc Thorns, and I don't think that means through some weird cheese mechanic where you're running some self-damage loop, right? We need some way to reliably proc stacks of Barbs and Quill Burst. Right now, one of the biggest pain points are bosses, rares, and pinnacle content where getting hit is too risky, or the enemy does too many attacks that do not trigger Thorns at all. Having a way to proc Barbs or Quill Burst without taking damage would be a big win for the Spect. It could be a support gem that you slot into something like an Infernal Cry that gives you stacks of Barbs when you use that skill. Could work like the Spirit Gem Time of Need, where on a timer you get refreshed with Barb stacks. Could have a support gem that every third or fifth attack with a skill you get stacks of Barbs. All of these can work, but also can be risky for balance and gameplay fun. I want to be very clear about that. Just some ideas that I wanted to throw out there, but we need some form of way to force Thorns damage for not just pinnacle content, as I wrote here, but for the content that just does not proc Thorns damage. Maybe GGG is okay with the world where, we are creating this master document of every unit in the game that Thorns can interact with, and we, put up the red flags that are just these are the enemies that you can never interact with as Thorns, you will always lose, or these are the most deadly ones, or 90% of the time, most of their attacks will never interact with Thorns. Maybe that's what GGG wants, and they will try and solve all of those units individually, but I don't think that would be what they want, and I don't think that makes sense from a design perspective. And then when you just take into account pinnacle content, there are eventually going to be pinnacle bosses that no matter how tanky I make my character, I won't be able to tank most of their hits unless GGG is actively designing every single pinnacle content to have multiple hits that come at a frequency that is viable for Thorns. We won't be able to do all content reliably. So we need some way to forcibly proc stacks of Quill Burst and Barbs. Diablo 3 had it where it was set up to where all of your auto attacks did your Thorns damage. I do not like that. I like the way that GGG has set up Quill Burst and Barbs. It's a very give and take place. You're still having to take damage to deal damage. And that is key to me when playing Thorns. Like, if that stops being the thing with like D3 Thorns, you did not have to take damage to deal damage in D3 Thorns. That was not a reflect build in my mind. You have to keep that aspect of it, but there needs to be some way that we can reliably proc Thorns, and maybe not. Maybe that's just a weakness this playstyle always has. But it was the last point I wanted to have. I hope you guys like this video. I hope this makes it to GGG, because again, as of right now, I will not be league starting as Thorns in patch 0.3 without significant changes to Thorns. And the biggest ones to me are the all hits reflecting from Thorns from Crown of the Pale King. That effect has to be moved to a Spirit Gem. If it was moved to a Keystone that was within range of Druid or that area down there, then maybe I would still league start it. But I feel like the Spirit Gem has to be the play here. And then Quill Bursts and Barbs. One of those two, probably Barbs. I think it has to be Barbs. They have to be moved to a tier 1 support gem. Without that, I'm not interested in league starting as Thorns, but I will be league starting as a Reflect build either way. If you have not seen my Wind Dancer Reflect builds, they are awesome. And if you're watching this video the week that came out, I am probably streaming my solo self-found attempt for my Wind Dancer Smith of Kataba. I'm just going to give myself a little bit of a test run into a league start environment with the Wind Dancer in case I end up playing it on league start. So if you're enjoying the content, please like and subscribe. Apologies to Darth Microtransaction. We once again ran out of time. Take care, boys. See you in the next one.